to that, but Thomas had kind of brought up something that I thought about a lot, and I got a very convinced version of it. And it's basically like the Lion King, basically how you cycle through. You're a walking mammal, and then when you die, you feed the grass. And I kind of see that as that's kind of still you, even though you're not a conscious being.
Well,
that's kind of how I think about how that, you will never stop existing.
What do you mean you're kind of still you? Because you said that you're not conscious, but if your consciousness doesn't live on, I believe that your matter, the elements that compose your body, they don't just disappear, they're recycled. But it's
like if you lost your leg, would that leg still be you?
It's difficult, but that's not even what I called in to say, so I guess I'll just move on.
Sure. I'd like to just throw in a quick 2 cents about that. I actually hold that your consciousness is a byproduct of having a brain, and that if I suffered some kind of traumatic brain injury, I could theoretically not be me ever again, and I would be something else. Because, what am I but my, the story that I tell about myself, what I know about myself, what I like, what my aspirations are, and where I want to go with those things. So if those things change, am I still me? Those are all kinds of questions that I would ask. And so I think that's where I fall in with with Thomas on this one, is I don't think I am me after I die. I think that, just like you were saying, matter continues, but...
Yeah. A couple examples I would give you on this.
The kind of argument comes from the same place.
What'd you say?
The kind of argument comes from the same place as in if you had a family member in the hospital with brain trauma, you would still point to that person and say that's your family member, even though all of a sudden, they don't have any of the same memories or saying any of the same things.
Well, I think what Eric is getting at here is that your consciousness, your mind, is a construct of the brain. And a few examples that I would give you on that is, one is a very famous case of Phineas Gage, where he had a railroad spike go through part of his brain, and it caused his personality to radically alter. And this isn't a one-off either. This is all throughout neuroscience. You'll have scenarios where part of your brain is damaged either through a stroke or through some type of external injury or trauma, and it'll alter someone's personality. Or you have the case of H.M., who underwent brain surgery, had part of his brain removed, and he had severe retrograde amnesia as a result of it, and I think he had anterograde amnesia as well. And so when you lose your ability to form new memories or to remember things that happened in the past, and your emotions are radically altered, you can look at that person and still say, genetically they're the same, maybe some of their habits, their quirks might be the same, but who you are, it changes. That's not to say that person isn't still valuable. That's not to say that you shouldn't still care about and try to take care of someone, because they still experience pain, they still experience, feelings and sensations, they're still a human. But when your brain is gone, when you die, there's no evidence that anything lives on afterwards. There's no evidence that there's anything there. I did a whole video on near-death experiences that really dives into this and dives into what we know is happening and dives into all of the inconsistencies that we see across cultures between near-death experiences and what they experience in the afterlife. And it's everything points to the fact that it's entirely going on in your head. Mm-hmm. And so unless I had some real evidence pointing to the fact that something lives on, that consciousness is able to, be embodied in something, or that it's able to think outside the brain, then I have to maintain this position of severe skepticism when it comes to that notion.
And I know, Zane, that you have another topic that you want to present.
Being alive does not make you stop being you. When you have a dead body in the ground, yes, that's still my uncle there, even though he's still not alive. Same thing as if you drive a Chevy. If they take it apart, that transmission is still from your Chevy. If you're still smart enough to recognize it, if you could still find a serial code number, you'll still realize, oh, yes, that's part of my Chevy over there. So if we was that good with humans, because we decay, it's kind of hard to keep track. So, like, after organs decay and all that stuff, you turn to mush or you get eating, it's hard to point at pieces of the person and be like, that's still my uncle. But, you know, as like I said, for Chevy, it's easier. You can still point to that transmission and say, that's mine.
Well, but at the same time, I mean, you can't help but address things the way they are as you see them. Like, let's say, and this would be horrible, you know, if it ever happened, but let's say someone, you know, that you cared about was in a coma, right? You would still say, sure, that is my relationship there, you know, but you wouldn't be able to have the same relationship with them that you had before they were in a coma, right? These are things that, you know, you would still be interacting and you'd still have those emotions and you'd still have that connection. But when that person can no longer interact with you in a way that you have known before, then you're left with what you have now.
Can I kind of jump in on that too? Like, if you have a family member who's in a coma, you still have someone who, like, they still have their memories intact. They're just not able to tap into them. They're not able to access them. They're in a comatose state. But they have a potential to come to and to still, you know, jump right back up where they left off. Whereas you start getting into a gray area when you talk about what makes you you. And this gets deep into philosophy. If you go back to, like, the concept of the ship of Theseus, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's this ship that, like, over time, over the course of like 100 years, it was, you know, taken apart and different parts were added back in, and it's
slowly replaced.
Yeah, once you have every single piece of the ship that is removed and changed, is it still the same ship?
And if you did keep all of those pieces that you replaced and then reassembled them.
And by comparison, if you have your body that is every, you know, 7 years or so, it's like swapping out all of its cells, all your skin cells, all your brain cells, all your blood cells are being replaced. Is that still you? Like, you have different memories, different experiences. So 7 years from now, it kind of is a different person, but you have the same genetic code with a few mutations.
Yeah.
You know, but it's largely different material that makes it up. The consciousness lives on through our memories, through, you know, our emotional attitude towards the world. That's largely dictated by our genes. It's, you know, dictated by our experiences and by our neural anatomy. But, you know, I wouldn't say that Chevy is still that Chevy if you take all the pieces apart and you melt them down into something else and build something else out of it. Eventually the materials are recycled into something completely different.
I mean, I would still be able to say, like, yes, that's my Chevy. Like, if someone went ahead and made a coffee mug out of my bumper, I'd be like, yes, the coffee mug is from my bumper on my Chevy. So,
yeah, but if it's not yours anymore, then... But anyway, I think you actually had something else you were calling in about. We went down this rabbit trail, which I really like.
I was going to say, if imperfections in character bring realism to Bible, like the fact that they're not perfect people, like,
sure,
to that, you know, make it more realistic.
Well, have you read Harry Potter?
Yes.
Was Snape a perfect character?
Would he be a perfect character?
Yeah. Was he perfect in the way he behaved to other people?
I don't really remember the characters that well.
No. How about Draco Malfoy?
I don't know.
No. Well, these are characters that behaved in cruel and callous ways towards others, but that doesn't mean that they are real or more real. They're still characters in a book, right? So how would that be different from the characters in the Bible?
Well, an issue I was going on about was a couple of like 6 weeks later. 6 weeks earlier, I had called in, and I had heard a little bit more of what I usually hear is where people try to point out.
Zane, we're starting to lose you. It sounds like you're in a very windy area. Is there any way you can get to somewhere that has less wind? We're trying to adjust for it, but it's starting.
Hello?
Hi.
Am I good?
You're better, yes. It sounds like there's less wind. I just wanted to be able to hear you a little better. Okay, that
was bad.
That was bad.
Oh, should I take my headphones off?
Try that.
Okay.
Holding on.
Hello?
Waiting. Hello?
Okay.
Oh my gosh, that sounds way better. Yes, let's do that. Okay, go ahead, man. Can you start from the beginning? Because I couldn't catch everything.
I was going to say, a lot of counter arguments I hear to the Bible, like a lot of the go-tos is pointing out malicious behavior of either God or patriarchs in the Bible, and I'm just kind of wondering why. I don't know, like I'm kind of a different Christian, I guess, because I'm just thinking like, why would you even try so hard to say, you know, God and the patriarchs are benevolent? You know, why wouldn't you just say they are who they are? You know, imperfections would just make them more realistic, because like, who do you know who's perfectly good 100% of the time? The fact that you see them do some bad things every now and then will make you think like, yes, that's what I see in the real world. Sometimes people are good, sometimes that same person is bad. That's more relatable. That's what you understand is real.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Holden Caulfield. I mean, we can go down a whole bunch of different fictional characters who had jaded pasts. I mean, most of the interesting ones do. It doesn't make them real.
Can I touch on this a little bit?
Yeah,
though?
go for it.
Because a lot of the characters in the Bible who are referred to as righteous, you have people like Abraham, who is going to sacrifice his son in order to show God that he is, you know, a man of faith, and that, you know, that was him passing the test, is that he's even willing to sacrifice the body of his own child. Now, to us, you know, we look at that and we're like, that's horrific.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely horrible. And then you see these other areas where, you know, David will go out and he'll go and slaughter a bunch of Philistines and take their foreskins and go and bring it in as, you know, a demonstration of like, how, look what I did for God. I killed all these enemies of God. And yet for us, we see that and we're like, holy crap, that's like some next level genocide right there. Yeah. And God commanding, you know, the slaughtering of men, women, and children who are non-believers.
The Amalekites,
and so it's not so much that the Bible is depicting them as like good in spite of the badness. It's that the morality, the moral framework has changed since the time of the Bible. Those things were actually righteous. They were actually good to them in that scenario, in that context. They're actually following what God told them to do. They're doing the will of God, which was like the number one thing you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to blaspheme. You're not supposed to doubt God. And yet, for us, our moral framework now in this day and age has changed so much. So for Christians to come along and say like, oh, we have an objective, never changing moral framework, I'm like, one, they're completely disconnected from reality. And two, I'm very glad that they're disconnected from reality and not sacrificing their kids, most of them. Mm-hmm. And although there have been one-off scenarios here and there where people have done crazy stuff like that in the name of God. But you know, it's not that the Bible is depicting these people who are flawed, and, you know, yeah, some of it they'll point out like David's mistakes with like Bathsheba.
And Noah was a drunk.
Yeah, but a lot of times what they're showing is that they'll show things that it actually values, it actually esteems these actions, and we just see it as horrific now because we've had a few thousand years of moral progress.
Yeah, and so that's specifically why that gets brought up. Is that those assertions?
I don't understand.
Sure. So if we have people call in who say that they get their morality from the Bible, right? Or that these are perfectly moral characters, or that this book demonstrates morality. And so what Thomas just did is describe to you an entire list of times that there were completely immoral actions taken in the name of that God, to demonstrate that even in the Holy Book, that God acts immorally, and that's just a response to the statement that morality comes from the Bible.
Well, okay, I guess I don't have too much to say. I think like a lot of arguments would be, you know, de-chambered if a person didn't even try to say that, you know, God is good or anyone else in the Bible is good. They just said they are who they are, you know, so you can't say their bad actions make them less real or less, you know, important to think of.
Yeah, it's not about a less real or more real thing. It's about a less moral or more moral thing. And that's the response to it. The reality, you got to prove before we can even talk about it, right? I mean, you have to show that those things happened before we are going to entertain the rest of that. But the assertion of morality is the response to that. And actually, I wanted to ask you one other question.
Okay.
What are your views on heaven?
Some people get to go, some people don't.
Okay, how do you decide? How do you decide who goes and who doesn't?
I don't. God does.
Okay.
How does God decide?
Very strangely, it kind of seems that he has those people that he reforms, and that's who gets his favor and
if
good things on earth, and sometimes heaven as well.
So does God? I'm assuming you believe that God made us. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
And did God make psychopaths too? So if God made psychopaths who are inherently born with smaller than average amygdala sizes that causes them to not be able to feel or sense emotions to the same extent we do, is God setting them up for failure? Because if so, that's kind of fucked up.
Well, and does God love those people less? Is that why? Because in the Bible that I remember when I was a believer, God was all loving.
Well, the whole reason I brought this up is because since childhood, I never was in love with God and still was a believer. And after, seeing y'all show, I'm just kind of really thinking, why is this such a big argument talking about whether or not if God is good or not, when I could, pretty much go the whole way through without needing to think God is good and still go to church and so on and so forth.
Why would you worship a God who's not good?
Belief.
Yeah, what compels you to worship a God exactly.
Is it out of fear?
I mean, it's the same way how it is with the government. I mean, if you don't, there's people who hate the government, hate the cops, and they still do what they say because they're there.
So do you hate God?
No.
Okay.
So you fear what would happen if you don't?
No, I just always thought that, there's some good things that come with some of the advice. So I try to take all the good things I can and be a better person.
That's, admirable. I suggest that there are lots of other places in this world that you can take good from. And I hope you do. I mean,
that was basically the majority of my experience.
Well, real quick though, I want to backtrack. You said that you find that you can take good from it, but just a few seconds before you said that you didn't necessarily believe that God was good, or you felt like that was irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. I mean, even some of the most terrible people got some good lessons to teach you. There's some drug dealers that will tell you to stay in school. I mean,
well, I can learn from serial killers like Ted Bundy, but I'm not going to emulate him as a source of goodness. I'm not going to worship him.
Emulate him as a source of goodness, though.
I'm not going to hold him up on a pedestal, worship him, or go to church to tithe or preach his name.
But your God killed way more than Ted Bundy.
I don't know. I thought I kind of already said it, that I don't try to go ahead and preach that God is good. It's just...
Well, and so the question is if you don't think that God is good, why do you worship him?
I mean, the same thing how I said with the government.
Okay, I can prove that the government exists. I can show you, and if you get in trouble with the government, you can go before a judge. You can experience the government, right? If we were to make this analogy fit, it would be a government that never did anything, and so we would be arguing about whether or not that government exists and not whether or not it's good or bad, right? That's why it doesn't follow.
Well, I guess if I watch y'all enough, well, then maybe I might be in the same mindset as y'all and not believe and throw it away.
The important thing to me,
but I'm
Zane,
not at that point yet.
No, and the important thing to me, Zane, is that you continue to question. Right? What's important is that you want to know as many true things about the world as possible. You don't need to, and I don't want you to just listen to me and do what I say, because that's terrible too. What I want to do is help you develop your tool set so that you can better understand the world around you, because that's amazing. I mean, I know that you were listening in on the calls before, right? We're talking about this incredible stuff, this mind-blowing, just information about existence and the cosmos and this amazing, beautiful, incredible world that we inhabit, right? Learn about it. You're giving yourself license to explore and grow, and that's how we grow as as society, as humanity. And I want that for you. I want that for you. I think along the way, by developing that tool set, you're probably going to come along to where we're at, but that does not mean the journey's over.
Yeah.
It means it just begins, because that means you have the answer to one question, but that means that we have every other question. And I don't want there to stop being questions, because I want us to keep learning.
Not just every other question, but every other question is suddenly available to be looked into. So like I used to be very religious, and there were some things that I was taught you just don't question. You don't question God. You don't question the existence of God. You don't look into your faith. You don't doubt Jesus or his existence or any of this. And so being able to suddenly look at the universe from a perspective of, well, if the Bible's not literal, suddenly I can explore an old universe. I can explore the possibility. Maybe it's old, maybe it's not. Let me look at the science and figure out what all of the evidence points to. We can forensically examine our Earth and go back hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of years and find out more about life and about chemistry and us and geology and all this different stuff suddenly becomes open to explore. And so what we want to leave you with is that truth withstands scrutiny. Don't be afraid to scrutinize this stuff. Don't be afraid to open it up. God in the Bible, whether or not he's a good character or a bad character, is kind of irrelevant, because there's good characters and bad characters in fiction. The big question is it true? And the way that we can figure out if it's true is by leaving our fears aside and exploring into it, because if it's true, it'll stand up to, no matter how much you scrutinize this stuff, it'll withhold it, and it'll withstand scrutiny, and you'll be able to explore it, and you'll have more evidence to stand on. And if it's not true, all that is going to fall apart, and you get to figure out what actually is true, and that's where we want to go.
That was beautiful. I was going to say a lot of prohibitions when it comes down to learning things, and a lot of things that seem to be against the Bible. I think it's just a lot of people saying that, such as abortion. When I actually watched, it was actually an atheist Bible study that I watched, where it said the Bible actually gives you some instructions on how to perform an abortion on a woman if you think she was unfaithful. Mm-hmm. And if she was unfaithful, I think it said, well, you could divorce her. And if she wasn't, well, then, if she was faithful, well, then y'all could stay together. So,
and when I was a believer, we never went over that verse.
So a lot of things that are anti-abortion, I'm just thinking they don't get that from the Bible to be anti-abortion because of what I just said.
Yeah, I think it's funny that, the further you go along, the more you find that people think that their God agrees with everything that they agree with and wants everything
and
that they want.
I also don't think the Bible could forbid you to learn about evolution, because I think that is demanding that God didn't use evolution, saying that, no, he had to do it the way I thought in my head, rather than maybe he really did put processes in place. So, you can still learn about that.
So I can't help but think about Laplace, right? Laplace was an astronomer during Napoleon's reign and wrote this treatise about the movements of the heavenly bodies and presented it, and it went off. It was all about orbits of planets and just how so much of our universe, and it was amazing, but it didn't have anything about God in it. And so famously, Napoleon calls in Laplace and says, well, you've written this book, it's fantastic, but I don't see God here anywhere. Where's God? Because if you're writing about the movements of the planets, surely you have a spot where God has to be there making it happen. And Laplace responded, I have no need of that hypothesis, right? That you have it there when it needs to be there. You explore what the need is. You learn what you don't know. And if you don't know how to explore it, if you don't know how to investigate it, then you build a tool. And those are the best. Those are the best. People talk about E equals MC squared. It's not like that was the solution. That was the beginning of us being able to ask an entirely new question. And every time we go along that way, it's building new tools. And so...
And more useful tools.
Yes!
Because if you just assume that like the planetary bodies are moving because they're pushed by angels or by gods, you cannot make predictions off of that. Whereas if you have actual, scientific equations and formulas, you can predict when the next solar eclipse is. You can predict when the next comet's going to come flying by. Mm-hmm. You can predict all this different stuff, and we can even put, land a rover on a comet or something. We can do asteroid mining. We can get these trajectories that are so perfect that we can land a rover on Mars, and we know exactly when to launch it. So all of this stuff, it's not just valuable because it tells us it gives us a framework to look at the world. It's valuable because it has predictions that actually pan out, and we can become more and more and more accurate. As far as using the Bible, you mentioned a second ago that the Bible has a different way of looking at abortion than what you're used to hearing about, at least here in the States. And it has a different view on evolution than what a lot of people talk about. And I would say push it a step further. Why are we looking to the Bible at all to dictate our policies? Why are we looking to it at all? Like, is it true or is it not? That is the question that we want to be asking.
Yes.
And so often people are afraid to ask that question. They feel like it's sacred. And I think that the idea of a question that's too sacred to look into, I think that that's horrible. I think that's freaking awful because, like I said, if it's true, ask it.
So
or if it's not true, ask it. Find out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
Why should the Bible be the basis?
And where that fits in with your statement is you said, how come God didn't use evolution? Why do we need to insert God when we have evolution? Like, where is God in this hypothesis?
I was saying that to show how your learning does not have to be stopped. Like, you could just say that fits in with the Bible. I think there are a lot of Christians believe in both God and evolution.
I mean, not in my church, but...
There's no reason why both can't fit.
I lived overseas, and pretty much all of my friends were European, and they accepted evolution. It's mostly in the Bible Belt where we see this contrast. But the contrast always stems from a literal interpretation of the Bible.
And
and I got some friends who believe that God gave us some stuff to study. Like, that's, will be some fun of the human experiences to look at, things that are in the world. That's, God giving us a toy to, we look at that and learn, observe.
But whether or not you had God, couldn't you still observe and enjoy the, unwrapping, peeling off the layers of the onion to figure out how the universe works?
Yeah, you could do either one. I mean, they don't conflict with each other.
What if they do?
What if that bridge when I come to it?
Well, because I really don't have a problem with a kind of a deistic view of God. I think it makes an assumption that's unnecessary. But you could say, okay, God wound up the universe like a clock, left it to run. He doesn't interact with it at all. Maybe he's a highly advanced alien civilization that kick-started the Big Bang, but he's not powerful enough to be omnipresent, or he doesn't really care about the workings of man, something like that. Like, I don't really see a problem with it. What I take issue with is when you have a biblical interpretation that is like God not only cares, but he cares about the finite little things that you do to the point that he would have you burn in hell for eternity for so much as questioning him, for so much as doubting him, and for so much as asking these questions that you're not supposed to ask. That's where I start to take issue with it. I don't think it should be dictating our politics because I don't think that there's any evidence for the veracity of these claims.
And I actually have an issue to take with you after this about that.
Well, I don't know. Well, when it comes to dictating politics, I just think that people get all the different types of interpretations, and they could go either way with it.
Okay, now I have to bring up my issue. So, and Zane, I know you're following us along for the ride. But actually, if there's nothing else, I'll probably take this after the call. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, or this has been a really fun call? Wow.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, by the way, for calling in.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and
let
listen.
the conversation stop there.
Okay, well, feel free to call in again. This was really, really good. I'd really look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Yeah, and you also got the Reddit and Twitter sphere. You can engage with us too.
Mm-hmm. And look up Holy Koolaid. Okay. It's really, really cool. His show is just good people.
What's the Reddit link? Is it on your website?
So talkheathen.com really just hosts our podcast, but if you want to find us, there are very active conversations on our official Facebook discussion group. Oh, look at that, it's thrown up on the screen, facebook.com, talkheathen, reddit.r/talkheathen, mail, me, Jamie, and we have our Twitter that was just built, and we're going to throw that up there as well. If you're not looking at the screen, you can go back through the episode and pull this up and engage with us in any of those places.
And I'm at Holy Koolaid,
like the shirt.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Hey, take care, buddy. Thank you for calling in.
You too.
Yes!
Now, okay. What's your issue with the
Deism?
The first cause alien super...
No.
The reason I put that forth is because, we have this notion that Arthur C. Clarke basically stated, any highly advanced...
is indistinguishable from magic.
Technology,
right.
Yes. And then Shermer, I think it was, took it a step further and said it would be indistinguishable from gods.
Right.
So assuming that we get to the eventual heat death of the universe, but our technology has advanced so much to that point, maybe we could reverse entropy and we could kickstart another Big Bang, create some black holes or something that, I don't know. I don't have the first grasp of physics enough to be able to, or I don't think anyone does.
And I don't have issue with that at all.
Okay.
What I have issue with is the idea that there's not a big, you don't have a big beef with deism. The idea that God wound the universe like a clock and let it go.
From that framework, I can't disprove it.
You can't disprove it in the same way you can't disprove fairies, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or people who say that they talk to the monster in their closet. Yes.
Because I don't see that it affects my life in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, I have to, I don't see a God interacting with my life in any way, shape, or form.
Gotcha.
And so I have to be practical in this regard, and I have to basically decide, am I going to live my life worshiping Bigfoot and the Tooth Fairy and the Loch Ness Monster, or this God? And if there's no interaction, and we can do things like prayer studies and see, even if we can't necessarily test this physical or this, supernatural ether, we can still test the effects that it has on the world.
So long as you claim, as long as it claims, yeah. We
find that there's no evidence whatsoever.
Again, I agree.
And so as far as if there's some type of first cause like that, it really starts to beg the question of where did that alien come from? Why couldn't we be the first ones? Maybe we're in the process of evolving to that stage. Maybe it's impossible. But it's not going to alter my life. I'm not going to reshape my life around the possibility of something. Well, and
that end part is where I take issue. Okay. Because I think you're a very rational person. I think you are a very intelligent person. I'm glad, and I wish more people didn't shape their lives around what could be and worship what might be. But there are people who do. Yeah. And those people vote. And we live
in
a
not deists,
country.
They're theists.
Oh, no, there are lots of deists who vote too.
No, I'm not. Right? What I'm saying is the people who are basing political action off of the existence of a god, they're not doing it off of the existence of some amorphous creator that's just a first cause and doesn't give a shit or interact with us in any way, shape, or form. They're doing it from the position of it's a theistic God who not only cares if there's gay people in existence, but he doesn't want them to be able to legally, have a relationship because otherwise he's going to send hurricanes and fuck you up.
But what if it's a type of magical thinking that leads to things like homeopathy, crystal healing, chakras and things like that, where you have a magic an acceptance of a magical thinking, right?
But
and I kind of want to stomp out magical thinking. I do take
an issue with that.
Okay, then we're good.
Because what I'm referring to is a purely natural idea of a deity. It would be a deistic deity. And I'm not saying that I hold this position.
Sure.
What I'm saying is I don't take issue with a position where it's a technology-based, not a technocracy, but like a techno god or something that not god of techno, but god of technology where it's so highly advanced, but it's all within the natural world.
Can we get Techno Viking? Can somebody post that on Reddit? I really miss Techno Viking. Okay. Let's.
It's not supernatural. It's not like chakras and the universe is somehow some self-aware entity. I think you just lost your mic.
No, I think it's still good.
Right. Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense though? Like,
no, it does. It does.
I don't see people who believe in like maybe there was a first cause. I still think that really starts to beg a question. I cannot take that position because I think it's like if God is more complicated than the universe itself in order to create a universe, then it's like it's an even bigger question. If God is within the universe and he's able to kind of kickstart or spark something that's it's like a kid lighting a match in a fire. He can, a match in a forest. He can start a big fire that is outside of his control, but he was still the first spark. Maybe there's something like that.
Sure.
That happens in cycles. Maybe it's cyclical. Eventually, there would have been kind of an origin. There had to have been something.
Maybe.
Unless time is like completely circular, or like
but okay,
this stuff starts to blow my mind.
Yeah, so if we're taking it back though, where I'm going with it is not the belief itself. It's people who ascribe the belief. It's people who
in the
sign
supernatural,
on to it.
though.
Yes.
I'm talking about the natural, and that's where I like. If it's supernatural, yes, I do. Okay. I do take issue with it without evidence.
All right, then I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good. Get to the next call. That was really.